Today, Nvidia officially teases the RTX 5000 series, and we have some performance info. But before I get to that, we have a huge issue, and Intel's B580 reviews are in. Welcome everyone to Gamer Melt. First up for today, not too long ago, Microsoft announced a new Windows feature called Recall, set to launch with their Copilot Plus PCs. It was essentially where the OS would take random screenshots at certain intervals while you're doing things on your computer. You could then use AI to search for these screenshots later. It was billed as a way to go back and see what you were doing in the past, whether to look up something you were working on or whatever. Regardless, most users, including myself, were rightfully outraged. I mean, besides the obvious security issues, the sheer number of privacy issues alone were enough to cause concern. So much so that Microsoft put the project on hold. Since then, Microsoft claimed that it would come to Windows Insiders after it was previewed in some early builds, but then they delayed it, then it was delayed yet again, and I mean, for a feature that's so hated by its users, it's wild that Microsoft seems hell-bent on releasing it. I wonder why. Either way, it has since been released, and it's looking like a complete disaster. As you can see right down here, it says the new version of Recall encrypts the screens it captures, and by default it has a filter sensitive information setting enabled, which is supposed to prevent it from recording any app or website that is showing credit card numbers, social security numbers, or other important financial personal information. In their test, this is Tom's Hardware, this filter only worked in some situations, but leaving a big hole in the protection it promises. Starting things off, as you can see right here, when they actually were entering what is very clearly personal information within a PDF, you can see here it's pretty blurry, but this is social security number, and then they add a social security number, and what do you know? It took a screenshot. Then, we have information like phone numbers, stuff like that. Then we go over here. You can see that they typed out Capital One, their Visa, this is the card number, CVV, expiration date, Amex, username, password, obviously very sensitive data, but it was typed into Notepad. Obviously, while that may kind of seem like, oh, well, who would do that? Well, a lot of people would do that. So it's pretty wild that it, you can see, took a screenshot. Now, most of this data is fake, but they actually also used it. Obviously, they're not going to share it here, but they used it with real information and it did the exact same thing. In fact, the only things that it really did block out, you can see right here that Recall refused to capture the credit card fields when they went to the payment pages of two online stores, Pimeroni and Adafruit. In both cases, it only captured either the screens before and after the credit card entry form or a blank form. Basically, the AI is supposed to filter sensitive information out, but it sucks. It handles things like forms that likely have metadata associated with them, so that's obviously super easy, but it won't even notice a PDF form that says, hey, this is a social security number. Imagine doing something like quickly jotting down an obviously important note that doesn't explicitly say credit card. Ultimately, I really hope Microsoft shuts this down altogether. Next up for today, Intel's B580 has officially been released, and we have reviews. But first, this is your last chance to get some really great deals on PC hardware before all the sales are gone. I'm not going to go over anything here, but I'll have some of my favorites down in the description below. They're affiliate links, so they don't cost you anything more, and it helps the channel out. Now, back to the story. As you can see, Intel's next generation Arc B580 reviews are in, and I'm gonna quickly go over some of these from Tom's Hardware. Specifically, like I've said in the past, what I really like about them is that they have multiple games that they'll then average, so we can just kind of look at one slide without going into each game individually. And starting things off, when it comes to rasterization, you can see that the B580 does fairly well. At 1440p, it does beat out both the 7600 XT and RTX 4060, and it completely decimates the A770. With that said, the 7600 XT is slightly better at 1% lows, but it isn't really a huge difference. Moving on to 1080p, it definitely looks like these get much closer in terms of performance. You can see here the 7600 XT ultimately wins out, though we're talking within margin of error difference here. I mean, very little difference, though. Once again, actually with both of these, the 1% lows are better with the 7600 XT and the RTX 4060. Not only that, but one thing I just kind of want to point out that really does suck is that these are fairly expensive GPUs, and yet they can't handle 17 games above 60 FPS. I mean, they're having a tough time on average getting a 60 FPS, and then obviously those 1% lows are even significantly lower. With that said, don't forget that Ultra in many cases in a ton of games is effectively useless, so it definitely isn't worth the massive hit. So I have no doubt that if you turn it to medium, it'll do significantly better. Moving on to ray tracing, this one is pretty wild because the B580, now if you haven't noticed, this is with a 13900K. This one is with a newer CPU. That's just because Tom's Hardware has been using this for a while, but they aren't using it anymore, but they're just trying to kind of show you what'll happen if you use a lower end CPU. Regardless, here it completely crushes it. It crushes the A770, though that was already beating the 4060 and especially the 7600 XT. But then obviously that also means that it crushes the 4060 and decimates the 7600 XT. It really is wild given the fact that ray tracing was a really big thing pushed by Nvidia. It's just wild to see that Intel is doing quite a bit better than them in comparative GPUs. Not only that, but here, even the 1% lows, Intel's Arc B580 beats all of them out as well, though of course the 4060 does get fairly close here, but yeah, definitely a win when it comes to ray tracing. And that is 1440p. Then when we move to 1080p, you can actually see that yes, the B580 is still winning, but the RTX 4060 actually starts coming back here. In fact, the 4060 does win slightly in 1% lows. And then the 13900K really is just here for reference. You don't really want to compare it to that. So it's basically neck and neck with the B580. Moving on, when it comes to GPU power, you can see that the RTX 4060 when running this test does better than all of them. Then the 7600 does fairly well, but that's really not even in this comparison, to be honest. So the B580, not amazing, but not terrible either. Finally, we have temps, and here the 4060, which shouldn't be much of a surprise, does the best here as well, but the B580 isn't all that bad, and neither is a 7600 XT. Ultimately, I'd really say that Intel's B580 is a pretty decent GPU. It's definitely one of those, this is great for the price. With that said, given the fact that both Nvidia and AMD are set to release their next-gen GPUs very soon, I don't really know for sure if I could suggest buying it. I mean, I will say that the lower-end cards likely won't come out for quite a while from now, so if you are interested in something at this price point, should be a good buy. Unfortunately, it is out of stock, though that's likely just because it was more of a soft release. Anyway, regardless, I will have links to this down in the description below. And lastly for today, in a recent video, I discussed the fact that B&H showed all of the RTX 4090s as discontinued. And I titled that video, RTX 5090 release confirmed, meaning it's coming, it's on the way, it's definitely releasing. Unfortunately, quite a few of you were upset about that title, so I did change it, but I was honestly surprised because I felt that it really was confirmed. I mean, Nvidia obviously wouldn't cancel their flagship GPU if the replacement wasn't right around the corner. Regardless, I have some great news because Nvidia officially teased their RTX 5000 GPUs. Starting things off, as you can see right here, this is the official Nvidia GeForce Twitter account. And it says, "It all starts now. Celebrate 25 years of GeForce." Then down here, the image that they shared, this is GeForce at CES 2025. Then they put 50 right in the middle of the image. Then they also make a reference to this LAN event. It says, "Play along and join our GeForce LAN 50 event." And for those who don't know, that's actually right here. And basically what this is, as you can see right down here, this is a marathon gaming event, a LAN event. Really cool if you ask me. They're going to have prizes, a bunch of stuff like that. And this starts January 4th at 4:30 p.m. Here's the thing though. Do you know what's exactly 50 hours after this? The CES event, where it's very obvious at this point they are announcing the RTX 5000 series. And if that wasn't enough, just recently there was a new reveal trailer for The Witcher 4, and in that you can see that it says that the cinematic trailer was pre-rendered in Unreal Engine 5 on an unannounced Nvidia GeForce RTX GPU, i.e. almost certainly the RTX 5090. And speaking of the RTX 5090, a known leaker on Twitter, Everest, asked some people, what are your expectations about RTX 50 and RX 8000 cards? And in the reply, Raichu, a well-known leaker who's absolutely gotten tons of leaks correct in the past, stated specifically on the RTX 50 cards, we're looking at 60 to 70% faster in flagship products, 30 to 40% faster in high level, and 20 to 30% faster in mid level. Meaning, if this is right, that means Nvidia's RTX 5090 is set to get a massive boost, but the lower down you get, it's even less. And what really sucks about this is that this is already what they did with the 4000 series, meaning the higher end cards are going to make an even bigger gap with the lower end cards just closer than ever. Ultimately, that's great for those planning to purchase the, say, 5090, but anything lower than that, not so much. With that said, I do want to point out that this person was later asked, you're saying, oh, so we're looking at 50% faster, and he states, it's just my expectation, but this is a leaker who almost always says things like maybe and stuff like that, yet all the time they're right. Given the fact that he only spoke about the RTX 50 cards and not the RX 8000 cards when that was also asked, I would say that this is probably more than a guess, but of course you do want to take this one with a grain of salt. So while that does it for today, are you pumped for Nvidia's RTX 5000 series? And if you are, which card are you planning to get? Let me know down in the comments below. And don't forget to check out those deals down in the description below. And as always, have a great day.